Hi, I'm John Stewart, Chief Investment Officer of Farmers Trust Company. This is the Investor's Edge.
The Investor's Edge, Market Insights with John Stewart, is brought to you by Farmers Trust Company.
Hi, I'm John Stewart. Welcome to the Investor's Edge. First up, the week in review. Tame inflation reading helps keep market on track. Well, inflation pressures have continued to moderate in May, with the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, up just 0.1% for the month versus an expectation of a 0.2% rise. And that reading's up 2.4% over the past year versus expectations of 2.5%. Now, while it's unlikely that this report alone will be enough for the Fed to cut rates at its meeting next week, it does increase the likelihood that the Fed could look to cut interest rates at least 1 or 2 times between now and the end of the year based on the cooler inflation data. So what looks to be a Goldilocks economic environment has stock investors optimistic that the S&P 500 could reach a new all-time high before long. With the benchmark stock index down roughly 20% on the year just 2 months ago, it was seen as a long shot that stocks could reach new highs this year. But now we're just about 1.5% away from accomplishing that feat. For this week's featured insight, keep some liquidity. It rarely makes sense to have all of your money invested. Why is that? Well, because you might need it. Unexpected expenses pop up all the time. And while most stocks and bonds can be quickly converted to cash, what happens if you're forced to sell at an inopportune time? And despite the expectation that your bonds will hold up when stocks fall, that isn't necessarily always the case. Just a couple of years ago, in 2022, the stock market fell 20%, and most bond market indexes were down more than 10% as interest rates rose. So with money market rates still paying around 4% interest, it pays to keep some liquidity for a rainy day. Looking ahead, busy week for investors. Well, I already mentioned that the Fed meeting will be taking place next week, and it's highly unlikely they will change the current interest rate policy, but as always, what they say about the current economic environment and their outlook for future interest rate changes will be very important and could move markets significantly. However, there will also be a lot of new data coming out. Retail sales figures will give us key insights into how well the consumer is holding up, which is considered a key pillar for the economy and markets, given that consumer spending makes up 70% of GDP. We'll also get several pieces of data on the housing market, including housing starts, building permits, and home builder confidence. Keep your head on a swivel. Once again, I'm John Stewart. Thank you for watching The Investor's Edge.
The Investor's Edge, Market Insights with John Stewart, is brought to you by Farmers Trust Company.